And welcome to the Great Satan. You are joined here with me and my guest Kyle. My name is Jason Fifi. Will has the day off for Ramadan. We're going to talk about one of our favorite decades. No, we're not. I just wanted to listen to some Killing Joke because, did you know they dropped that lawsuit against Nirvana when dude killed himself? And it's like, you could have took that money from Courtney Love. What's your problem?
Oh yeah. Big mistake.
Yeah. If
Bigger,
anything,
the
you
bigger of the
waited
two.
and then brought the lawsuit.
Yeah. What's up, guys? Fifi, it's good to see you again, man.
You too, man. Long time no see.
Yeah, I was gonna say, outside of like some stand-ups and some random here's and there's, I think the last time we really hung out in earnest was I remember back when Drunk History came to Montgomery, and you told that story about how you would buy like a bunch of $5 wines and put them in a jug and like mix them together and just get trashed off of it. It's great.
Oh man, I forgot about that. Yeah,
Good shit.
that was a really fun. That is a fun story. That story that tells you how drunk and history don't go along, really.
No,
because I forgot that story.
Yeah. Drunk History. I never did get to meet the host. I was like following him like a little puppy dog all night around the Aviator Bar, and like it's got the 2 levels, so I was literally like trying to, please, I'm cool. Put me on TV.
I promise I'm cool.
Yeah, it didn't happen.
Yeah, I think that was pretty much pre-planned, like who was going to get.
Yeah, it definitely was.
I don't remember I remember recording, like I remember the lights and the camera and the questions and stuff.
Right.
Knocked out like a 45-second version of a story, and then I don't remember much after that. I do remember that dude is like that tall.
Oh yeah, no, and he's cool too. Like he was really nice and polite, but I just remember like watching the episode and I'd be like, oh wow, that was Aviator Bar, that's so cool. And like the 4 people they got were like, all of them voted for Hillary Clinton. Like all of them were just the most basic, like neo-lib. Like it was such a disappointment for me because I was hoping that they would at least get one black face in Montgomery, Alabama, but they didn't.
Right. Yeah. You're in a county that is, 50-50. Honestly, it's more, but like we're going to say 50-50.
Yeah.
And it was all white people and all, middle right-wing people.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's why they should have done it at the Rose.
Yeah, big time. Also, that guy's too short to get shot.
It just would have gone over him.
It would have gone over his head. He would have been fine. Security detail would have had an easy job for sure. I'm actually going to take a short break and turn my fan on because it just got hot in here, and I'm taking this jacket off.
Yeah, you're in a blazer.
I respected you enough to wear it, but I keep my door closed in the air conditioner. That's how it works. So I'm pausing for 2 seconds. All right.
I kind of wonder, like back, you mentioned the bartender or the bouncers. I was a bouncer for 2 years in Auburn. And I kind of think back, like, I wonder what the bouncers are like in Montgomery bars, because the only experience I've ever had with them have been like checking my ID. I've never actually, run into a bouncer of any substance. But I don't know, maybe that's like a good thing.
Yeah, that is a lucky thing. I mean, you're a little younger than me, not like a ton younger than me, but like I remember bouncers being a lot more proactive. I mean, I remember bouncers being pretty proactive in Auburn back in the day, like a long time ago. But I think fights happened more when healthcare was affordable.
That is so true. Yeah, so true.
Back in my day, you could get your teeth pulled at the barbershop. So it wasn't such a big deal, and we all, we were down to rumble a little bit.
Well, isn't that weird though? Because you'd think it'd be inverse, right? You'd think that when alcohol comes out and the truth comes out, right, that, we're so frustrated with the economy or with social issues or what have you, you'd think that we would be more willing to fight now when it comes to, like you bumped up against me, whatever.
No,
not at all.
Not even close. No,
can't afford it.
Nothing is worth the risk anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that goes back to that, like Nelly and I get into that all the time where he's like, man, they're going to do it. We're going to get it. It's like, no, we're not. Like, where are you finding a big enough group of young people that is both like willing, understands what we're up against, and has the experience and wherewithal to fight anything. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, a lot of us, yeah, like we're in positions now where we're older and we can't go to get, we just cannot go to jail. We
Big
cannot
time.
do it.
Big time. I haven't done graffiti in over 10 years because I'm just scared.
Wow. Yeah, I think I was in Memphis the last time that I did anything, of substance like that. And it's funny, like in Auburn, when I was a bouncer there, I bounced at Sky Bar, and like it was funny kind of thinking back on that, because a lot of the fights that we did have were all frat boys. Like all of them, their dad owned the dealership, that old joke. Like that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah,
They could afford it.
Yep, exactly.
They've got the platinum care, Blue Cross Blue Shield. They'll be fine.
Big time. No deductible.
Right.
We're socializing their health care.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
They have socialized health care.
Yeah, they got into Auburn on merit.
On that sweet ass golf swing.
Yeah. Oh, what a nice transition. Auburn healthcare, higher ed.
Oh hell yeah, we did it. We built it's called building. I like that.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, the first should we even talk that we have a list? So historic role of higher ed is what we have for the first note. But so you mentioned Auburn and higher ed. Like, did you want to talk more about like specifically their historical role, or?
Well, it's just funny, higher ed in this country, and that's the reason that I'm on this podcast. I've been working in higher ed for the better part of since I was after grad school. Auburn, the university, in some form has been paying me since 2013. So ever since grad school, I've been teaching, and I got a job in admin stuff. So right now, my big sort of role, and if we have a plug that I'm going to try to promote, is Alabama Prison Arts and Education Project.
Nice.
I've been working with that group for the better part of 2 years now, and a supporter for 2 years. And that's kind of why I'm on the podcast, hopefully to kind of talk about higher ed and just how fucked we are. Like right now, this pandemic, and that's kind of the reason I'm assuming for the great Satan, hail the great Satan, by the way. The whole point behind this, right, is that, this pandemic is just bringing conclusions from trends that we were gonna see in probably 4 to 5 years. But like, we can see it in healthcare, which is the conversation right now. We can see it in immigration policy, which, honestly, accelerationists are loving this right now. And the bigger point, I think, is there's a lot of ripples that people aren't thinking about, one of which is going to be higher ed.
Yeah, big time. So the historical significance of higher ed in America and how that differs from its previous Western traditions, or like, is the problem now, do you think that it's rooted so deeply in that, Western like ownership hierarchy kind of thing, or is it a uniquely American problem, like the way that we've done secondary education?
Well, and historically from the way back, right, like education in general with America has been one of the few really good arguments for socialists in America. Like Horace Mann, he was a great force in the early 1800s. In the middle 1850s, every state had elementary education that was completely state funded. We had federal government programs, again, as early as Horace Mann, and trying to put in, common initiatives across the board, with schools, no matter where you're from, trying to get people on board. But in terms of colleges and universities, it's interesting because I think, are you also from Montgomery?
Yeah, born and raised.
Okay, yeah. So both of us are from Montgomery, and we know Alabama, and that's going to be kind of my angle. I know that the most. That's what I'm going to be talking about. But like historically, it's interesting because almost everything in Alabama's history is on racial lines. What's interesting, though, to me is that college and universities over the last probably 30 years are trending very, very differently. My boss, he graduated from the same college that I did. And, just seeing like how different things were back then versus now, it's just going to be interesting to see, again, these trends come to conclusions. Because right now, trends are kind of pushing towards a socialist dynamic anyway. You know, we were always trying to fight for public education and, you know, college being, you know, not just like a university education, but trade schools, what have you, those options being publicly funded, with the idea being that, you know, we're going to provide a better worker, we're going to provide a better economy that is more equipped to handle these specialized roles, these really niche markets, and even like, you know, just the basic skill set that you need to survive in this economy. Like back in the day, you know, we had factories, so you could go into unskilled labor and make a good living. That was my dad and my mom's generation, and they both went that route. Both of them worked in factories. But I'm sorry, you know, even though Alabama is an automotive state, that's still our biggest industry. You know, the big skills that you need are coding. You know, you need to have certifications, licenses, and we aren't being able to meet these needs regardless of, you know, how bad we need them. So like the coronavirus is a great example. We don't have enough nurses, but hey, we didn't have enough nurses in the state of Alabama before the coronavirus.
Right.
So we're starting to see these trends come to conclusions.
Yeah, big time.
One thing that I would say too, it's her.
Oh,
go ahead. Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, in terms of the historic role before the Civil War, we had been, you know, establishing in this country a really great precedent for higher education being, you know, the standard in the, you know, early to late 1800s, early 1900s. We were one of the only, you know, countries in the world, and one of the few after, you know, the Enlightenment, that really promoted high school being publicly funded. And what did that do? That meant that, you know, you had people who were better educated electorates, better educated workers, that you're able to, you know, push a lot of really boundary breaking things. By no means am I making a case for American exceptionalism, that like we were somehow better than the French, you know, but if you were to kind of look historically, higher ed has been a really interesting position because it has been a position of class. Like all of those colleges were, you know, they were teaching colleges, but before then they were humanities, liberal arts, lawyers, you'd learn Latin, you know, those kind of emphasis. That later part of the 1800s, we started to see the land grants. We started to see these, you know, initiatives being put forth where people were really more interested in learning agriculture, learning, you know, business. Those are the kind of things that both helped and hurt the case for socialism in a lot of weird ways. But I would say historically, the foundation that the United States built was actually a really progressive one.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there, I mean, that is one of the things that's like the accelerationists. I think of accelerationism almost like a pacifier, where it's not an ideology of growth or change that plans. It's a concept of looking at something that's happened and then hoping that it's going to mirror something else. But like those land grants and that especially like post Civil War, like the progressive era in American history.
Sure.
It's a lot of it, when we look back on it, wasn't socialist in nature. It was the federal government giving out these pieces of land and creating a petite bourgeois, like middle class existence, which is not the same thing as like building pure, you know, workplace democracies, right? And it really,
and for sure, yeah. I mean, and a lot of those early colleges too were just directly funded, like Vanderbilt University. It is the probably established jewel of the South in terms of academic excellence and programs. You know, it was sort of used for these grooming tools. Alabama, University of Alabama is a great example where that was the college of sharecroppers. You know, and for a long time, people at Auburn were made fun of because it was the cow college. You know,
right.
That rivalry doesn't have just to do with sports. You know, people didn't want what would become Auburn University. I remember reading like Demopolis or some random part of Alabama could have had the Auburn that Auburn became. But they didn't want it to begin with because, again, it was sort of a more working class university. And now the opposite's happened, right? Because the nature of the entrancing, we'll talk about admissions later, but with Auburn being the best in the state, you know, in terms of not only expense, but also quality of instruction and, you know, degrees and stuff, it's almost exclusively white.
Yeah.
And you look at the alternatives, the liberal arts humanities colleges, and suddenly, they're filled with Black students. And it's kind of like, well, what happened? Auburn has this sort of, beloved working class, middle class feel. And yet now, you look and like, I remember in like 2017, there was like 92% white undergraduates.
Wow.
So, and that's the kind of funny irony that comes into these kind of things and these sort of contradictions in higher ed, where like, yes, it is great that Harvard is the voice for all of these progressives and, these progressive economists and blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, it's Harvard. It's the, it's the quintessential bourgeois paradigm that Marx even talked about when Harvard was, at its, infancy and at its, so it's kind of funny to me still, like how all these trends kind of associate, and just thinking about that historic role of higher ed, it wasn't meant to be what it is now, which is a lot of people go to college because they want to be active participants in the economy. They think, education is going to help my family provide, and I'm going to be, but, in reality, the historical basis doesn't really make sense with that. And there wasn't a lot of people that went.
Right. Yeah. It's great. Yeah. So, and that demographic shift, where it's not representative of the low middle all the way to the upper middle. It's not demographically representative, not just in our state, but in other states and in other types of higher education, especially a subset that I call the higher trades.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So grad schools at Auburn, they're like their graduate degree programs. They have some of the best building sciences, stuff like that, where it's basically just getting really good at doing construction.
Yeah.
You can get your master's in doing construction. And, outside of what's that called, where they're from another country, exchange students, outside of exchange students, it was almost exclusively white people. In, at the graduation ceremony I went to, it was wildly white.
Well, and that's where the diversity really is. Like, if you look in their graduate programs, when I was in grad school, going to the grad school fairs and stuff, that was sort of a just completely different experience, because you'd see all these kids from, India and China, and you'd see Black kids. And that was really, I think, what it was supposed to be more representative of. And, that's the thing, right? Like, grad school really, it's important that you get it. But honestly, when you look back at what alumni you were, it's your undergrad experience. And, that's the same thing. Like, I could go to Harvard right now and go, but if I'm not going to the law school or undergrad, it doesn't really say as much.
Got it. Yeah, exactly. And I've kind of experienced, like, when talking to people about grad school, that is kind of the experience I get, or the opinion that I get is like, don't worry about the name of the grad school, because it really doesn't matter. What it still says Auburn on your undergrad. So
yeah. Well, and that's the funny thing too. You go to Texas and they don't know what like AUM is. They see Auburn and they're like, okay, cool. It's the same like Texas A&M Corpus Christi. They don't know what that is. They say Texas A&M. So just get your degree. And that's kind of one of the weird things, right? Because again, it's this contradiction, right? Where you have like education, it is the biggest marker for sort of a long-term, income, wealth that you will get for your, in terms of growing class divides. It is the biggest help. But, it's kind of the thing though, like where if you look into what it takes to get into college, almost all of these, again, in this state at least, are on racial terms. Last year, the average ACT score, which you would take to get into college, is a 19. But if you look at Montgomery Public Schools, that number is not a 19.
Right.
So, where is this group coming from? And that's kind of the thing that one of the things I hope to talk about today is that in a weird way, public schools are one of the last bastions of socialism that we could sort of build on, in the same way that like the USPS, that's the conversation right now. We need to save the Postal Service. I've been saying for years, look, if you don't want to support public schools, that's fine. But like in Montgomery, we didn't have private schools all over the place until integration.
Right.
Like that's a product of integration. So, let's not be so hasty when it comes to those kind of markers, because if the metric to getting a fair shake and trying to like determine, all right, we need to do this, and that's going to help you gain more money, become better equipped to be a better electorate, blah, 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 is education. Why are we so fundamentally failing these one group? And you know the answer.
Right. Absolutely. It's intentional. It's racism.
Of course.
It's using economic markers to do racism,
Well, and in the state of Alabama, we even knew like back in, I think the 90s or whatever, like the kids, the number of kids who wouldn't pass the second grade to the third grade, that number told us how many prisons we'd need to build in 20 years.
Yeah.
Like we can see how now the education system is feeding directly into other systems like criminal justice. Or imagine, right, like if we decide, okay, we're going to make college free, what will that do to military recruitment? Because I've talked with classes, and almost every single person that I've talked to in the military, we're only doing it to pay for college. If that's their biggest recruiting tool, to say, all right, well, we're the federal government, that's a public school, it's just kind of, the same money shaking hands, no money's really lost, then what do they do in terms of recruitment? There's all these sort of interlaced industries, there's all these little ripples that you can see, and just how dangerous it would be if we really did make college completely publicly funded. It wouldn't just be that every kid gets to go to Auburn, it would be more important. It would be that, we cut from the military recruitment, we cut from the criminal, prison industry. Those kind of things are the bigger sort of picture things that we also need to be talking about as socialists, as leftists, and as, people who have a moral obligation to try and better our community, because we know education will only yield good things.
Exactly. Yeah. And the don't educate young because you get to give them to the military. It's the old like Starship Troopers thing.
Yeah, it really is.
You get the basics if you're willing to risk your life for it. The Pete Buttigieg.
Oh yeah, exactly.
His idea of it's not his idea. It's been called, what is that called? Like a nice fascism. What's the thing Nelson calls his dad? Benevolent fascism.
Right.
Benevolent fascism is this idea of doing fascism, but to everybody equally, with no racism in it.
And I mean, imagine if that was held to the same standard for the upper class, right? Yeah. That like, if, okay, well, if that's the case, then everybody goes into some form of military service that grants you education. Imagine how that would last and what loopholes there would suddenly be. Because right now, one thing that's kind of funny is that Donald Trump has sort of bucked that trend of like, you have to be a military person. And I've always thought that was really an interesting dynamic, because in a way that's actually kind of, for class consciousness, because this is just some business guy. And like, he openly makes fun of John McCain and like veterans, and he just doesn't give a shit. And it's really funny to me kind of seeing that dynamic, because historically in the presidents, which do you prefer? Do you prefer like this just idiot who's, obviously making fun of people who serve? Or do you prefer the more like maybe intrinsically evil sort of expectation where like, you have to put your life on the line just to even be able to afford the mechanism for improving your class status? Or like, I wonder in a few years, right, if we were to implement public education being completely publicly funded, how that would affect things like public office. Because to me, it's interesting that like we so often fail our first responders and vets and blah, 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 the list. But yeah, and it's really interesting to kind of see what that would translate to if, there was just no incentive to do it anyway. Like a lot of the people that went into after 9/11 and going into the Iraq war, they came into this jingoist attitude. We really don't have that. Like nobody wants to go to war with Iran unless you're just like literally just, fucking, Ignatius Riley from a Confederates of Dunces or somebody like that. So.
Like some kind of actual, like a proper sociopath of some kind.
Yeah. And there isn't that. Like, I mean, and that's kind of the funny thing now, like without that attraction, nowadays, I mean, kids go to the military because their family did, or, that they are trying to pay for college, or that that's, you know, the best path. And I've always kind of heard that joke that in Montgomery, if you get a girl pregnant, you either go work at Hyundai or you go to the military.
Right.
So, I mean, you know, and that joke's been around since I was, you know, in like high school back in like 2005 and 2006. So make of that what you will.
When I was a kid, Hyundai wasn't here, so it was hop on a train or get in the military.
Why not? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, and that's kind of the weird thing too, right? Like I always, you know, am very critical of cops, and I'm very critical of military and all these things. But I actually look at like the people in my life who went there. They're lower class, you know, lower middle class people who are trying to make a living. They're trying to better, you know, themselves. And even though I don't believe them when they say things like I'm trying to, you know, protect the country, or I'm trying to, you know, I don't believe them. I do kind of at least empathize with them and understand that, you know, I probably came from that same place. And if I wasn't very lucky and got into, you know, technology magnet schools and was able to get a really good scholarship, it's a place of privilege for me to, you know, look down on cops and look down on, you know, these kind of places, when like the truth is about over half of our cops in MPD are Black.
Right. Yeah. And it is like, that's another, like, it's important when we say ACAB or whatever, when we say all cops are bastards, we don't mean the individual isn't a cop, right? The individual.
It's the idea of a cop.
They're forced to be cops, and we're examining the systems by which people have to either murder people for a paycheck or starve to death. And that's the bastard. Right.
Well, and that's also a good point too, right? We've got this idea right now that, like, you know, prisoners are appealing en masse. They're saying like, look, you know, coronavirus is rampant. And honestly, you know, it's worse than coronavirus. I mean, as somebody who has worked and taught in prisons for, you know, several months, years, you know, it's truly an awful place. And I'm not saying by any means that there's no place for a prison or there's no place for jail. And I'm kind of a little bit more conservative in that way than some leftists are. But, you know, honestly, if you know, get caught for even like stealing something, right? Like, or, you know, being violent or something, you know, is part of your sentencing going to be to, you know, be injected with this virus to be sick?
Right.
No? Well, then then using that logic, you have to take it to the next extreme and say, well, look, they are. Love it.
Yeah. So reading recommendation, it's super short. Not necessarily for you. You probably already read it. It's great. For anybody else listening to this, Angela Y. Davis, Are Prisons Obsolete? It's really good. It talks about like when we'd use prisons in an ideal situation. And like you said, if you're not just a pandemic, but like if you sentence someone to time away from society, you don't get to then tack other punishments on top of what that means.
Or even like fucking taking their right away to vote. Like, who came up with that bullshit?
I mean, slave owners.
Yeah, yeah.
Literally slave owners came up with that. And some states are doing an okay job of slowly chipping away at that.
I know Florida recently.
Yeah, that legal language or whatever. And even in Alabama, there's ways that some types of felons, once they've served their time or like done their debt to society, whatever, when they get out, they can get voting rights back for some things, right? Not everything, you know, we should either stop calling it a right or it should be a right. And once you go to jail and you're out of jail, you should still have that right. And I believe that for guns too.
Yeah. I mean, and it's kind of a weird place that you're in now, because now it's like, you know, this is the actual substantive, nuanced discussion that, you know, we just don't even see anymore in a lot of American discourse. And it's, you know, nowadays like, oh, well, you know, you're just supporting rapists, you're just supporting child molesters, you know, you're saying this. But what I'm really saying is like, you know, what is the rationale for putting these people in this place? What is the rationale then, knowing that these people in this place will die from this disease?
Right.
Because like, are we sentencing you to be raped by men? Is that your sentence? Well, no, because that's what's going to happen. Like, regardless of George Bush's, you know, PREA, you know, that is going to happen.
Right.
You will be experiencing violence. You will be experiencing mental and post-traumatic stress, and you will likely be back in that system just because we decided to put you there. So,
Right.
but, and again, when you're talking about education, these things do feed into one another. If we know that poorly educated kids who are not passing second to third grade for behavioral issues or for whatever, if that is the metric that we use to say, all right, well, we're going to have to put more, we know this, then you have to be at least also willing to talk about criminal justice when you talk about education, and vice versa.
Absolutely. And it also prevents people from getting into secondary education, and then not, whether you get into secondary education and complete it or not,
Yep.
is a huge indicator of class mobility. And one of the main problems in America, one of the crisis of capital right now is that the lie that they've told us the whole time about capital was that, oh, under this mode of production, there's this beautiful class mobility. Well,
Sure.
yeah, because tomorrow Bill Gates could just like put too much on a craps table and
and what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. They say that there's no ceiling, and that, it's up to you, like if you want to work really hard and do well in school and do the right things, then you'll just go up and up and up and up. But, that's the reality. And that's why I think with me, I'm from a lower middle class background. I could have easily seen a couple of nights where if I hadn't done this, or if I had gone to this place, I would be in that place now. And that's kind of what, a lot of people I think need to better empathize, because even like I deal a lot with students who are in high school who are taking the ACT, and I'll look at some students and I see like an 11 on the ACT. And just to give you a frame of reference, 19 is the state average, 36 is the best you can do. 11 is not damn good. It is rough.
Yeah.
But it's like, I look at this and my initial thought is, wow, this must be an idiot. But this is the thing. The ACT is delivered by a private for-profit company. Same people who do the SAT and the GRE. Yep. So, this one little group is controlling the entire platform by which we allow you to get an education, and to not only allow you that opportunity, we're not doing it for free. You have to pay us. So it's kind of funny, when you do take that step back and you say, all right, that kid's got an 11, but fuck, it's $50, $60 to take this test every single time. And like all of the current research all of the current literature will say, you need to take it multiple times, you need to take multiple tests, you need to super score all of those things, which you need to take, ACT test courses and shit like that. It's basically saying like, look, I know that you've got like no food right now. I know that like you're taking care of like your little sister and your little brother, and you work like at a gas station, or you work at like a Chinese restaurant or something, but you need to go ahead and spend about $700 more the senior year and your junior year so that you can make a good impression and get into a good school so that you can go $40,000 in debt.
Right. And then with that $40,000 debt, you're going to go right back to the gas station with a $2 an hour payment.
Exactly. Yeah. For some fictional job that like, we were all sort of as a generation sort of like, well, I'm done with high school. I guess let me just go to college. I mean, what else do I have to do?
Right.
Do I go to the military? That's the callback.
Right. Yeah, exactly. My appointment with, I'd taken, the like pre-tests and all that, and the Air Force was going to give me a huge gear budget, and I was going to be in the jazz band.
Love it.
And 9/11 happened.
Wow.
And I lucked out, like absolutely lucked out. Like if it hadn't happened if it had happened a week later, I would have been.
You would just be, you would have been stuck.
Right.
You'd be like infantry, like literally snake worming a fucking pipeline, like for Saudi Arabian pedophiles.
Big time. I would have been like looking the other way for Epstein. Like shit. Like.
Yeah. Like literal evil shit.
Yeah, we've been doing really evil shit for sure. So yeah, that's the other part that when I always say, ACAB and fuck the military, all that shit, it's there for the grace of God. Go any of us. No individual judgment. There's no choice in the matter, right? That's the other thing we talk about. It is they are coercing people to go into this, and people oftentimes that are the most vocally supportive of the military that did have a choice to go into it are high-ranking people that are, like your Pete Buttigieg's or whatever that didn't
Oh yeah,
actually.
you'll never actually see shit. Like
Right.
you'll never actually be in a position where you're not going to get officer.
Yeah, exactly.
Like as long as you literally don't like cuss out the drill sergeant, you will be fine.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Well,
Yep.
and it's so funny that you say that because I teach an online class right now, and it's a public speech class basically, and they're writing a public speech right now. One of my students is an airman, and she is giving the speech to convince the class to become an airman. And
Yikes.
it's so interesting listening to this because again, this is exactly what we're talking about. This girl, this woman is in my class, and she is only able to afford college because of the GI Bill, because of the post 9/11 GI Bill. She's in this class and getting this online degree while she is. But at the same time, you look at like what's her rationale for doing it, and of course, benefits is one of those points. You have access to healthcare. You can retire. You get access to public education.
Yep.
Those are three things that any socialist, any leftist would say that is your right. If you work full time, yeah, yeah. Honestly,
the middle there. I mean,
yeah.
Republicans in the 70s believed
Yeah.
that those are basic human rights.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like basic access to healthcare that you don't have to pay for if you get sick. The ability to retire if you work full time and work your ass off. And then 3, the chance to better yourself through an education. Those 3 things are what Bernie has ran on. Those 3 things are what, the sort of leftist coalition has been fighting for the better part of since 9/11. And it's so interesting kind of seeing this because again, this is the rationale that she uses directly for why she went into the military. And of course she has other reasons. She said that she had disciplinary problems, that she was a bad, person. She needed to, but outside of that, that was point 2. That was not point 1.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's like backed into, right? You don't know about that until you go into it. So there's no way to talk to a broad audience and say, look, hey, maybe you've had some discipline problems. Like,
But and this is the failure, right? Like we're talking about working class issues. We're talking about workers' rights. We're talking about things that can better middle class people. If you talk to like right leaning military people, almost all of them, the conversations I've had are guns. That's the issue they care about. ID politics and freedom of speech. Like, unless you're literally trying to be a Nazi, okay, those are the 3 issues that are the least consequential to the majority of working class people in this country. And yet, like, that's what the left has failed to try to attract these people. Like the left and specifically Democrats, they've done such a shit job of like making a case for why, as a working class person, we should change the way that we do things. That as a military veteran, like you can support Donald Trump, and that's fine. But like, you just know that going into this thing, Trump is the only person that expanded veterans benefits since, Bush W.
Yeah.
Or you can vote for the Democrat. Outside of the idea of politics, the left has got to be able to form some kind of a coalition based off of those things. And I guarantee you, if you can do it, like you said, it's not just socialists that are trying to fight for these things. Everybody wants the chance to get an education, to be able to retire, and we have the money.
Yeah, big time. We just proved we have the money. I mean, like with a quarter of the benefits actually going to workers, we were able to give most workers on unemployment a huge, nice little benefit to kind of keep you home for a while. And then for people, and that's a quarter of it. The other 3/4 went to just bullshit, right? Just to yacht payments and assholes.
Well, and the 55% of our, 55 cents of every federal dollar, it goes to the military. It's like, look, if we just cut the military expenditure in half, that is the money to get the benefit for the military. The people who are going into the military, that is the money that you need for the reason. It's so kind of cyclical that, talking to, right-leaning people, it's almost always a place of like, oh, well, fucking, I bet you're just some Obama apologist, you're just some cuck who, doesn't want to, let me carry a Nazi flag or whatever. But if you frame it in terms that, an average everyday person is looking for, like, look, all we're trying to fight for is the fact that you as a worker are entitled to the profits that a company gets from your labor, and the risk is bullshit. There is no risk inherent in this system. Like that would be the benefits that you're getting from the military as a citizen. You wouldn't have to do all of this stuff. And if you do want to, then we would give you better benefits than even the most staunchly pro-military war hawk could ever approach from the Republican Party. If we could do that, that's a better sell, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's really been interesting also to see during a like time of crisis like this, the universality of left concepts where people can come up with them organically as lifelong Republicans, right? Or whatever the fuck ideology they think they have, where when people were talking about bailouts, they were like, oh, well, if the federal government's going to bail out GM, why doesn't the federal government just own it? And then we disperse the profits equally among every person.
And it's such bullshit anyway.
That thought that up, right?
Like it's such bullshit because like you're totally right. Like it's already there. It's right there. Yeah. It's that easy. And like already we know that like the top 500 Fortune 500 companies, almost all of them are just literally sucking the teat of the federal dollar. That's the only way they could maintain or keep any semblance of that wealth. The top 190 of those companies don't pay any taxes. Like we literally already own these companies. We have enough share. If we were doing it by share, the public would literally already own these companies. And you know, it's so sort of frustrating to, you know, be that close. Like really, we are that close. We already own so much that like if the government just cut off this one contract, there's no need for the conversation. The company would not be able to maintain because there is no such thing as a free market.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And because if there was a free market, socialism would have already won.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's more of us than there are child rapists, and we can just fucking we can parody redacted them with, you know.
Yeah, satire, parody.
Satire. I mean, but unsatire, because I'm saying it as a hypothetical. If there was a free market, this would have happened already, and you and I wouldn't even be talking about it. It would have happened in 1921, right?
There'd be no need. Yeah, like literally,
1875, it would have happened.
This is the only legitimate conversation I will have with a libertarian. A libertarian will always go to communism is, you know, Venezuela, you know, how to work out for USSR. Once you get past that, though, the legitimate conversation is which utopia do you think is more attainable? Because there is no such thing as a free market. We have never had a free market. And the only reason that you are talking about this now is that you think that the free market is the answer to exactly what we want. We all want benefits. We all want to retire. You're thinking that I can do it through work and through a private company hiring me and I getting it on my own.
Right.
Okay. That's the only legitimate conversation. That is utopian. That is more utopian than a communist system where there is no private means of, you know, development and there is no capital to acquire. Right. So it's which utopia do you believe in? And that's the only legitimate conversation I'll have with a libertarian, because once it gets past that point of like, all right, we need a free market. Why? How's it work for Somalia? Right.
Actually, Somalia was the one I was going to bring up because like a buddy of mine he's one of the like Wrecker Caucus or Libertarian Socialist Caucus or whatever. And like, you know, all the ANCAP losers like bugged the shit out of him online or whatever. And he just started calling himself a Maoist and told him to fuck off and they don't bother him anymore. But when he was still, you know, saying libertarian socialism, whatever, all these libertarian, like far right libertarians would be like, communism only works on paper. And he's like, well, we only have one example in modern history of a purely free market, right? And inside that market, we can find maybe 3 examples of a human being engaging in investment capital to workers, meaning like giving, like there was an old woman that had a lot of weapons and loaned them to a pirate. But
which kind of, it fucking rules.
The pirate was co-op though, right? So even then, she was doing investment capital, but in a co-op. So it's like, you don't understand, if there is a free market, we get communism instantly, right? We do. Yeah. We naturally, as humans, do cooperative labor. We do communism. Even with like trade sanctions against Vietnam, they were able to do so much more than it's just whatever. every example that we look at, even with sanctions, they do much better than a free market. And with that free market, or sorry, with that systemic entrenched unfree market, they actually have more freedom in terms of their workplaces, right? They have a more democratic workplace, so they have more freedom
yeah, I mean,
in the market.
Cuba.
Cuba's a
Like
great example.
literally, like Cuba is a great example. Like we are sanctioning them literally to death.
Yeah.
Maria comes and like literally almost destroys the entire infrastructure. They're able to rebuild. You know, we have such issues. We have the highest death rate. You know, we have all these issues with infection. We don't have tests. We don't have all of these things for coronavirus. They're sending their doctors out to countries to help. Like Cuba, you know, I mean, I understand there is political dissonance. There's I think a legitimate conversation to have regarding like the left's defense of China, the USSR. But you know, honestly, who are Americans to say that the Chinese are evil? Like, are you kidding me? Like that's the only legitimate conversation in that I think that you can have is, all right, well, we need to at least admit that, you know, at a certain point, this is no longer, you know, a socialist communist model. This is a dictatorship. And, you know, at some point we need to recognize those things. We do need to take the good with the bad, but also, you know, that's the only legitimate conversation that I think the left but again, you know, that's such a minor thing. That's kind of like
the other thing
we were
is
talking
like
about earlier.
The Leninist model. So like the Soviet and Chinese model are both, they're started with a recognition that for a temporary amount of time, we have to be cops, right? We have to go into the military to get these basic human rights, right? Just like when I say ACAB, I don't mean that my good buddy is an asshole because he's a cop. It's like, you don't have an option. You starve, your kids starve, they don't get to go to school, right? You're forced to do it. So the Leninist model is basically that same thing. It's that trans kid that's going to kill himself at 18 unless he gets something, and the military is that thing, right?
Well, and that's the funny thing too, right? Like I remember, you know, I can't remember who said it, but you know, violence is the expression of something that can't be expressed. If we've tried through the electorate, if we've tried through public protest, if we've tried through dozens of years of, you know, trying to lobby, if we've had all of those avenues and we're frustrated to the point that you're pushed to violence, you know, then it's you can't dismiss it. I'm not going to admit, you know, again, that violence, I'm a fan of the electorate. I think that the democratic model can be amended. But, you know, this is the thing, right? Like that this entryism, we've tried it, it's not working. And this is kind of the bigger point that I've seen. You know, America is like the big bad in like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. But like the United Kingdom was the big bad that led to us being the big bad. So now like the United Kingdom is, you know, ever slowly drifting further. And it's not just the Tories. The Tories have been shit for like literally since Churchill and before it. But it's more important that like Labor, you know, going in and basically just outright saying like, we're just going to fucking, delegitimize the party and take away power for Corbyn so that we can pull, you know, liberal, whatever. That does not work. That is not, there's a reason they're not voting Labor. There's a reason. It's that you're failing.
Interest. Yeah,
exactly.
It's the class interest. And it's the same thing with like Buttigieg, Warren, Biden supporters are rich. They're PMC. I mean, publicly, all of them are Republicans. If you ask their bosses what they think about politics, those bosses are going to say, oh yeah, Sheila, she's a Republican, right? Because they can't, you know what I mean? They basically are just Republicans. And
well, in 10,
a lot of them are
10, 15 years ago, right? The conversation was, is gay marriage going to happen or not?
Right.
You know, that was the conversation. And, you know, now we put that to bed. Like, all right, you know, and maybe that is like the blue wave. Maybe it's just overwhelming liberal consensus finally yielded this. I disagree. I'm a bigger believer that like the bigger consensus is like, well, look, it's just not fucking worth, you know, our money and time anymore. Like, let them. If trans bathrooms were efficient and Books A Million can put like trans bathrooms and it saved them, you know, a couple $1,000 a year, trans rights would no longer be the issue. And that's the thing, like when you hang up on these identity politics or whatever, you know, it's so surface level and it affects such a minority of voters. And it's important that we protect minorities. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that, but like when you ignore the big part of your electorate, working class families, this populism argument is going to trump it every time. No pun intended.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is, the working class is made up of identity, of people of all those identities, right? So when you focus on one little piece of it instead of building broad coalitions of workers of all identities, then you know you're losing out on market share, if you want to call it, you know what I mean? You're losing out on people. And
I mean, and the GOP is already
with trans bathrooms, especially. You see, I mean, businesses owned by Republicans throwing one sign on the door that just says "the bathroom," and then they can put up a little virtue signal sign with a rainbow flag that says that they're whatever, and they can, you know what I mean? It's like it's cheaper, and we get to pretend to be on the right side of history. It's a win-win.
Meanwhile, that's like what Hillary argued anyway, right? Like she was like, look, regardless of what happens, we're bending towards the right side. Republican, Democrat, she almost uses Hegel in a weird way of like saying like, look, the synthesis is going to be progressive. It just takes time. You can't go too far. But like that's the furthest thing from the truth. Like Dr. King, he did say that the moral bend arcs to truth, but it's because fucking people are pulling it. Yeah. People on like really desperate places are saying, I'm willing to fight for somebody. I don't mean to steal Bernie's campaign. That's not me. I'm willing to go to jail for somebody that's not me. And usually minorities, small communities who don't have a lot of buying power, people that say, whatever, I don't care. But it just makes me think of like that kid that got into Yale who like posted Black Lives Matter 100 times for his entrance essay.
God.
Yeah. And like his kid, like he's the father, like his father's like a CEO. Like, I bet you they had somebody who did that shit before and they didn't fucking care. Like, they
were going to let that kid in anyway. Yeah.
Exactly. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Did you like that transition?
Yeah, it was great. And it was like a because we got to talk about standards and entries. We're going long too, and I don't pay for the full version of Zoom, so we're about to find out what happens when we hit an hour. The kid was doing it as a goof, apparently. Like,
really?
Yeah, which makes it even worse because it's like.
Was it Yale? Was that right?
Yeah, he was a white kid.
Like, was it Yale or was it Stanford? I can't remember.
Yeah, it was some, position of privilege.
Whatever. Right. Yeah.
And he wasn't at risk of not going there in the first place. So it was like, they didn't find some like kid doing activism that talked about his activism or whatever. He just was like, I got to do this thing. And he was like, it'd be funny. I found this guy, Jason Fifi, on Facebook, and he has a WordPress tool that tells people happy birthday every day. And I'm just going to use that to say Black Lives Matter instead of birthday,
I didn't know that you did that. That's actually enlightening.
You didn't know that?
Birthday? I did not.
You thought that was me?
I really did. I thought you just had it maybe like copy pasted into a Word doc and you just, start your morning off, you hit the alarm clock, you fucking roll out of bed and
it was me for a while. But yeah, I told WordPress to do it now.
Why not?
What's that?
I said, why not?
Yeah, exactly.
Go for it.
The future is automated. #Yang.
Exactly. That's why we need to give the machines the power to, yield their own profits.
Yeah, the machines need to tell us happy birthday every day.
They do.
So, standards admissions and like how do we flatten that and unprivatize the system by which?
Well, so this is the funny thing, right? Like this is a good kind of reflection of what we were just talking about with like liberals. And, I think California has always been a source of sort of the liberal haven, especially since obviously Silicon Valley, but largely Hollywood, right? Los Angeles, the Bay Area has always been a source for, I wouldn't call it leftism because I will admit that the majority of leftist groups are in California. A lot of artists are there, a lot of communities of color and diverse people. But I think that the better term might be like that, sort of benevolent fascists, right? Like that identity politics are incredibly important, organic, all of those 2000s jokes. But, it does sort of become a interesting place. If you look at historically, like right now, the California system is considering no longer looking at ACT and SAT scores. And that's interesting, right? Because, this was before the coronavirus. They were considering this.
Yeah.
And I think now the coronavirus is just making it legitimate. All the HBCUs from what I've seen in Alabama are doing this. But the irony, of course, is that, this is done for a good reason, probably. The ACTs are inherently racist. They're inherently, privileged. People of privilege are able to do better on these tests, regardless of their, measuring a objective standard of your ability to do well in college. But that came from California. The California system enacted the ACT as the sort of system, the modus operandi in the 1950s and 60s. So it's kind of funny that they are now kind of reneging the same system. They've always been this sort of leader and pushed other systems to follow suit. In the same way that, like with the coronavirus, it was interesting before spring break, our university and other universities across the state, nobody had closed yet. But what's the Samford in Birmingham? They were the first school to close. And then it's kind of like, well, shit. I mean, PR wise, I'm not going to be the school that a kid gets sick and it's my fault. So everybody closes down. And then they say, well, if that's the case, then high schools take the lead of the colleges. So everybody closes down. And again, I think in the coronavirus's case, obviously we need to be closed down. Self-quarantine is the best method until we can get vaccines. Boring talking points, I know.
Right.
But if it hadn't been, you can see how this ripple effect happens in terms of these prestigious whatever, systems. So across the country now, like it's kind of interesting. People are going to transition into GPA. And you look at like Alabama versus Georgia, our neighbors. Georgia has the Hope Scholarship through the lottery, which essentially is a tax on the poor. Let's call it what it is.
Right.
But the Hope Scholarship is completely determined based off your GPA. So high schools across Georgia are very important, right? Yeah. Because if you fail that quiz, that might be the 0.00 decimal that can be the difference between you getting this amount of money versus this amount of money, or even getting the Hope Scholarship at all. Alabama doesn't have that. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting, and it's going to be interesting to see. Auburn this semester, this is the first time that Auburn is looking into a essay for a long time. So you apply at Auburn, you need a good ACT, you need a good GPA, all those things, but you have to write an essay to get in. And I'm a very cynical person. My thought process is they have such a bad problem with diversity. If you have two kids with a 25, maybe.
Yeah.
But they're in such a weird place, though. That's another shift that we're going to see. And again, right, like this was a trend that was happening before coronavirus. Before coronavirus, the conversation was the ACT is a flawed metric. The SAT is a flawed metric for determining whether you will find success in college or not.
Right.
Should we be looking at an alternative system where we look at extracurriculars, interviews, whatever? Right. And you now look at this, and then the coronavirus comes and expedites this trend that was going to happen next year, the year after. We're starting to look at it now, and across the state, people are waiving ACT fee or ACTs for admissions and even scholarships sometimes. So you can see how arbitrary and artificial a lot of these admissions requirements and the standards by which we conduct the quality of education or the quality of candidates and students, it really is sort of paper thin. And this virus is interesting in a lot of ways, but primarily because, again, it yields these conclusions that we were trending to normally. I think, again, if you look at what's happening across Alabama, across the country, community colleges are starting to really become legitimized. In Montgomery, we've never had a community college. We've had Trenum, which is the trade school.
Right.
And, across the state now, they're offering such a good deal. And it's such a better, you're going to have to take fucking history if you go to, Harvard or whatever. So you're going to have to take those basics. Now, a lot of those high school seniors and those people who are interested in returning and going to college, that's the trend that we're going to anyway, where community colleges are funded in part by the state and by the federal government, not necessarily by the tuition dollars. They're able to keep costs low. They don't need a fucking giant football team or, a giant rec center. You go and get your basic classes and then you go. So that's kind of the system I hope, and again, I'm hoping that we can start implementing across the state where, not everybody does get to go to Auburn or Alabama or UAB or these big schools, but anybody, no matter where you're from, can go to a trade school. They can get their basics. So that's the system that Tennessee is doing, and they started about 10 years ago.
Yeah, so we know what we want, and we know kind of, the timetable might be tightening up on it. Who was already fighting us on that, and who's fighting us going forward, and how do we think that's going to change?
Well, in the state of Alabama, it's weird because our legislature is full of Alabama grads. Alabama has the law school, and there's a lot of power that comes from the Alabama Authority. I know that a couple of years ago, we had that kind of thing that came out from the Alabama Law School, that professor that did some kind of corrupt stuff, and that was in the news. Across the state, we have that a lot. ASU, which is an HBCU in Montgomery, for those viewers who don't know, they have like this board of 15 members, and all of them are corrupt. They're inherently they are basically a gang. Well, I don't like the word gang. That's got a bad connotation. They're like a right. Yeah, it's like an opium den. Let's call it that. That's less problematic, right?
I mean, we do have Hyundai here, so people could get the wrong idea.
Yeah, you're right. I take it back.
Let's not say opium den either. Let's say
regardless.
We'll pretend we're making fun of Nelson. We'll call it the mafioso.
Yeah. Right. Gabagool.
It's that kind of thing. Anyway, I don't know.
So they have this
good old boys network.
They do, yeah, and they have this group that they'll put one in as a president, and they'll just do a bunch of inherently corrupt shit that would delegitimize any other college. And They say, oh, well, it's okay. We'll get rid of this board. They put that person in, and they just continue shuffling people in and out of power and positions in the legislature. That's kind of what we're seeing across the state. And I think, again, we're trending towards something better, largely because of the big HBCU presence across this state, but also our neighbors are doing it way better. We love in Alabama to say that we're not Mississippi, but honestly, if we aren't careful, Mississippi is going to overtake us in terms of education, not just high school, but college too, because they are putting a lot of money into their trade schools and into their community colleges. And this once agricultural state, which is Mississippi, obviously the worst of the worst, they're actually doing a really good job of putting kids through the community college systems and trying to fund things a little bit more equitably. Alabama is not really worried about that. And in the process, we are giving kids better options, but man, it's tough. Like I know in Madison County with Huntsville and Madison up in North Alabama, they're kind of following the same model that Tennessee did a couple of years ago. And of course, Tennessee, they started with the trade schools because they didn't want their Republican base to, buck too hard. They kind of kept it quiet, not a lot of media coverage. They went on to expand it to community colleges last year, being completely public funded. And now you can get your first 2 years in this, random community college in whatever part of Tennessee, and you can go to, University of Tennessee and get your degree for half the cost, or, vice versa. That's kind of an easy sort of no-brainer step that we can do that really countries across Europe has already started. Like Iceland, they have extra years in high school. So you go to high schools across Iceland and there's like 20-year-olds or 19-year-olds in high schools. It's really weird. But again, this is just that sort of step that you could be taking as an alternative to saying, well, look, you need to take all 4 or 5 years, because let's be honest, nobody's graduating in 4 years anymore. Right. 5 years at this university, you've got to pay the dorm, you've got to pay all these fees. Those are kind of things that are conversations that we're starting to look at more and more. And, again, that's the trend. That's what we're trending to because of necessity. And I think in a weird way, this is actually a reflection of free market, because it's like, free market would say, like, if I were a student in Madison in Huntsville, right? I could go to Sneed, or not Sneed, Drake or Calhoun Community College, both two of the best community colleges across the Southeast and in the state, and go to UAH and get the whole thing done for a much better quality than going down to UAB and paying a dorm, or USA and Mobile or Troy or whatever. Those are the kind of conversations that people are starting to have across the state now. And honestly, it's probably for the better.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the thing we were saying, where the freer the market, the more likely you are to see socialism in little ways. And when you actually start to like take that veil off and say, wait, why are we just giving money to people that own yachts? Why do we keep that? Why is the system so in it? Like, why is there so much inequality in the system? And you go, oh, well, because it's, you know, it's the least free market in the world is capitalism. So,
well, and before, you know, the bachelor's degree in the 70s, it really meant something. If you went to college, you know, it really showed that, you know, you had the wherewithal and really the class. You were of a class that you could afford to go to it. And, you know, there's all those examples of like, you know, people from the 70s and 80s where they worked at a grocery store and paid off their way through school. But, you know, that's really more equivalent to a community college experience now. And like, if you look at the differences now, I mean, if you look again, if it's a free market, if we're looking at supply and demand, if everybody has a bachelor's degree, suddenly, you know, the need is less. So now everybody's going to post-secondary degrees and graduate school, and that's the conversation. Whereas before, grad schools were almost exclusively humanities, liberal arts. You know, now we're starting to see it in MBAs. We're starting to see, you know, a lot of this kind of stuff. And it's interesting, like I said, you know, we're seeing history departments just be completely done away with. We're not teaching history, but we have like business schools that are completely separate from economics departments. And there's a lot of examples like that where, you know, we're shifting not just academically, and you know, the academia is conducting different forms of research with technology. It's not just that; it's that there's a lot of forces that say, look, you know, these graduates are going to give the school more money.
yeah.
So part of it may be insidious, part of it might not be, but it is kind of interesting seeing these changing expectations of academic standards and programs, and also just the requirements to get into college, because the nature of college is such that it's almost like high school plus now. And unless you graduate in something like engineering or nursing or teaching, something which gives you a certification or a license, at the end of it, it's worthless. And isn't that the point of socialism, right? That you like get a job, you get like a trade, or you get something at the end of it. That's what we sort of started out from that model. It's kind of what we're trending to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now, you know, out to keep everybody afloat, we'll say, okay, we'll go to grad school. You can teach, you know, you can do research at this, you know, whatever firm in like, you know, whatever deep, dark recess of some building in Washington, D.C. You know, you can find some other opportunity to make sense of it. It's not just like this concrete, you know, or sort of old argument of like, oh, it's just underwater basket weaving or women's studies or whatever. There's people with like degrees in business management who cannot get jobs. They cannot get entry-level jobs in firms. They're stuck at Target. And it's like, you could have done that, like you said, or at the gas station for $2 more. You don't need it.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Like, I mean, I was from the, you know, when I first started college, I kind of knew what I wanted to do for a living, and then I was already just doing it. And then I was doing that to pay my way through college. And then, less than, 4 years in, I'm out earning my degree. So just stopped going. So for me, it took 12 years to finish my degree, because for the whole middle of it, I was working and making I was doing fine. And then just, went back because the kind of stuff that that I was doing was so much, it was a lot of effort, and I got really burned out. But
sure.
Whatever. That's going to be pretty common too, is people getting really bored with a field and moving around a little bit. And careers that aren't dynamic now, we need disposable people. So that means that you, as a worker, have to be dynamically changing all the time. So that's another part of that, which is a whole nother discussion. But yeah, man. I wanted to tell Jeremy and Zane this story. I mean, we're not done because we didn't wrap that up at all, and we don't really, but it was such a big topic to go through. Like we could
Sure.
talk about this because we're talking about like a century of economic development and a century of it, not just the economic development and the social aspects of segregating it and then not segregating it, but then resegregating it economically. And then like we could talk about education, both secondary and primary, for 3 hours if we wanted to, probably more.
Right.
We could do it for 3 hours a day for the next month and probably still not even get close to talking about it, like being done. But I wanted to tell them this story about fake girlfriend gate.
Please go on.
And I wanted to tell them about it because they're both not like super like clinically online, like they're
they actually like go outside. They like have friends and meaningful relationships. We're
not
just
me.
constant.
Not me. Just Twitter. So this dude, and I'm gonna say his fake Twitter name instead of his real Twitter name. No, actually, I'll tell you his old Twitter name. It was Smegma Torture 5.
God.
Smegma Torture 5.
Smegma Torture 4 was taken.
Oh, that was his old one before he got banned.
You're right.
He's actually had 6. He's on Smegma Torture 6 now. So 7 actually. The reason I said 5 is because 5 got banned and then now he's 6. So Smegma Torture 6. He is a dumpy looking, just white dude. Like he just looks like both of us, right?
Right.
He just looks.
I was gonna say we both look like the kind of people that go to state houses and like have a Liberty flag with like our gut hanging out in an AR-16. That's what we look like.
Yeah. So he looks exactly like that. And like 3 months ago, he makes a group chat with a bunch of like other Twitter lefties and some kind of big accounts that he just like puts in this DM, and he goes, "I'd like to just introduce you all to my girlfriend. She wasn't on Twitter, and we want to share this aspect of my life. Like, so I'm getting her into Twitter." And then
like a normal person would do, right?
Like you would do normally, yeah.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
If you had a girlfriend that wasn't on Twitter, and then you got her, into Twitter, you would definitely want.
That's literally like the online version of she lives in another town. Like, no, she's on Facebook.
She does live in another town.
Right.
Too.
Right. Yeah.
That's where it gets really fun. So they do live separate from each other. So a lot of her tweets are about cum, like really loving cum. And
as one does.
What's that? Yeah, of course. I mean, when I do it, it's different though, because I'm not talking about the dude that told you to follow my account.
Right.
Right. So she's like dropping his name, talking about like, she made like a vegan carrot cake or whatever and was like putting the frosting on it and was like, and then talks about, okay. The point is it's there. So for like 3 hours, we're digging into this thing in group chat. Like this guy is fucking making up this girl. Like,
yeah.
So Babs from Clout Grifters, shouts out, killer podcast. I just hit spacebar. Okay, good. We're good.
I think we're good. Yeah.
I don't know what spacebar does in Zoom. So she digs deep, right? She like just search Google for this image over and over again, every piece of her media, and finds one that pulls up a match to Instagram. And so she finds her gram and then messages her Instagram account and says, "Hey," with a screen cap of the girl's profile, right? So we're assuming at this point that it's a fake girl, not a real girl.
Yeah.
It's because, I mean, just buck wild shit. Just like every other tweet is about cum, which not normal girl behavior. But so almost instantly, though, I had the idea, wait, no, she's real. He's not real.
Oh, it's the reverse.
I was like, no, she's real, and she's a comic genius.
This is a bit.
She made his account, and then to get him canceled, the character that she was doing of this fake dude, she's going to now make a fake her account who's real, go through all this rigmarole, let his his account gets to now die. He's controlled opposition in this rise to the top of the heap of fame, right? So
Jesus.
So she's a genius. So she's talking all this cum shit. He's the most boring dude alive. His shit posting is just not, he's a nothing. He's like milk toast as fuck.
Right.
And so anyway, Babs messages her. No one else bothers her, right? It's just wait for this real person with an Instagram to reply with what's going on. Well, like 4 hours later, and I was so lucky to wake up in the middle of the night and like just hit the phone. She posts a video of her saying his real name, his real first name, and saying she's real, right? So it was a total like Reddit Boston Bomber kind of thing where everybody was just going after. We're like, we figured it out. She's fake. Right, yeah. This isn't real. But it turns out she's actually way funnier than him.
Yeah.
So he lost like 400 followers, and then she gained like 700 followers in like 2 seconds, which in shitposter terms is like,
oh, that's yeah.
She went from like 60 followers to like 800 followers in 2 days. It was crazy by people thinking she wasn't real.
See, this is like the reverse of this is what Elizabeth Warren thought might happen when she decided to get the Pocahontas test, right? Yes. Like this is what she thought might, but it didn't. Yeah. This could have gone a very different way, Jason.
Yeah, it could have. It could have gone a completely different way. See, like she's a fake girlfriend if you vote for her. She could have been your cum-obsessed internet girlfriend if you voted for her.
Oh, boy. Lizard emojis.
Snake. Oh, it's snakes. She doesn't have legs. It's snakes.
No, I know.
Oh, the lizard emoji. The Sobe energy drink. That's what you're talking about. No, she speaking of like the internet and quarantine and horny, Elizabeth Warren was like weirdly obsessed with like talking about horny shit. I don't know how much you ever watch like her Instagram lives or anything like that, but she was like,
no, I can't say I have.
I did because I am a glutton for punishment, especially early on when it was like, well, look, they're going to throw all their weight after beating Bernie. So if I have to, I was like not talking shit on her that much. I was like, if I have to hold my breath and vote for somebody that has a D next to their name, it might be her, right?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, Yang wouldn't have had, the base. And I mean, honestly, she didn't either. I mean, she couldn't even pull fucking second in her home state, but that's another conversation.
But Biden doesn't either. I think if the DNC had thrown their weight behind her instead of Biden, I think she would have had a better chance in the general than Biden. I mean, she would have lost.
I don't know. I think that honestly, I think that we are both actual like in politics and we're interested. And I mean, we actually like, care to read articles and, we do more than I have this feeling that, the fact that he's a vice president is actually better for the incumbent that just like no incumbent lost since what, Bush Senior, is that right? Bush Senior lost and that's the last time. I think literally America is so harebrained, like so far gone that the majority of us are just so slack-jawed and just smooth-brained and, just generally, have no idea where we are, that like the majority of voting class Americans will make up their mind in 2 weeks within the election. Like if Trump just completely annihilates him in a debate, which I really hope. I hope that like there's a debate because I want to see it. I want to see a debate between him, and I want to see the sons duke it out before.
Oh my God. I want Hunter Biden to just fucking wreck Trump Jr.
And when like Game of Thrones was really popular, there was like the Hound versus Clegane Bowl. Yeah. That's what it's turned into. Like the whole internet is on it. But literally I think 2 weeks out, that could be the determinant, because really it's like what we were talking about earlier. I think it's going to come down to how this virus goes. If this virus is still a thing in October, if this virus is still a part of the debate talking points, which I'm sure it will be, it's going to come down to largely, do we blame China or do we blame Trump? If we blame Trump, Biden wins. But really, if Trump just owns him, if they stick to these talking points about China, I think that, Warren, no matter what her plans say, because this is the thing, like, Trump will just lie and it doesn't matter. Like, it's just so artificial and so beyond the point of absurd that it just doesn't matter anymore. You can't fact check him. You can't say, well, you've lied like 16,000 times since you started. That's
that matters. But that's one of the main, like, Bernie would have won things is he also doesn't handle it like that. He doesn't come out and say, well, actually, and then, do that. He goes, shut the fuck up, queer. Like, shut up, shut up, you stupid. Like,
he's just got that energy that, like, he's just not going to put up with it. And Trump, honestly, like, if you're coming down to the conversation of, like, policy, I've seen very good arguments that Trump is left of Biden. And at least Warren would be left of Trump. That's an argument that I'm willing to entertain. That, like, okay, as a leftist, like, she's somewhat humoring the Green New Deal. She's somewhat humoring Medicare for all. She hasn't openly said she's going to veto it. She's said that she wants to expand public education, and that, as a matter of policy, there is an argument there. But I think she wouldn't have done much better just because of the name recognition. That, like, the fact that we've got a vice president running against, and I think it's one of the first times in a long time that's happened where a vice president runs.
Since Gore. That's the first time since Gore.
Yeah. So,
but Gore got handed to him too. I mean, granted, he won, but he lost, so he lost.
Yeah. See, this is the thing where, like, they lose and they accept it. Like Stacey Abrams,
it's almost like they planned it.
Yeah, well, like Stacey Abrams, she literally had her election stolen. Like, Jill Stein was going to sue Hillary for on the behalf of Hillary Clinton, and look at these votes again, and, like, these two whatever, and, like, Hillary just let it go. Like, do you not? And that's kind of the difference. I imagine that Warren would be one of those where, like, she could actually have a good case, and she might even lose by a close margin in some key parts, but, like, she wouldn't
let it slide. Yeah.
And that's another case against, Biden. That's a good case against all of them.
I wouldn't have. So, I mean, by the end of it and the way it went, and, like, she stayed in for Super Tuesday and intentionally fucked us out of it. But if that hadn't happened, and if a woman could never win lie thing about Trump's a misogynist. He said Trump's a misogynist. That's it. Like, he is a misogynist. If you don't think so, you're a fucking asshole.
Well, and the people voting for him are misogynists too, so who gives a shit?
Exactly. So he wasn't saying a woman can't win. He says against Trump, a woman's going to have a hard fucking time. And like, honestly, that's a charitable fucking thing to say about Hillary Clinton.
She could honestly not run against him on policy. She couldn't run against him on voting, like, past
Hillary.
No, Warren.
Couldn't have run against who on policy?
Well, she couldn't run against Bernie on policy.
Oh, not even close.
She couldn't run on previous voting history or track record. She couldn't vote. So her only bet was, maybe I can try to garner the same sort of wave that Hillary had, which was that Bernie bro, misogynist.
Right.
Nobody's discrediting. But it's like, dude, you haven't pulled,
neither of them understood, like Hillary and Warren both, neither one of them understood that the only people that even believe that shit are far right wingers. They're only
Republicans. Oh, sure. Yeah.
No one fucking believes that for a second, that the left is misogynist.
And the bigger point is, that, like, Bernie had this coalition of people that was the Democrats to lose. Yeah. Like, I'm sorry, Warren's people, they were going to vote Dem regardless. Bernie had a coalition of voters that were literally from, like, fucking chicken plants. Like, they went to, like, Somali, no, these are people that you can lose. You're not going to lose an Elizabeth Warren voter who has voted Dem since, she graduated college and voted Obama. So that's, the bigger point.
The best Tuesday that girl ever has is going to get coffee before work and then going to vote, waiting in line for 20 seconds because she lives in a great neighborhood where they definitely want her to vote.
Yeah, yeah.
Putting a little D on the thing, and then strolling into work with her "I voted" sticker and her nice scarf because it's fall, right?
Yes, queen.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's her. That's the height of her fucking day. So like,
Yeah.
or his day, right? There's
Same. Yeah, identical.
honestly,
Identical.
I think most the bro thing is more aimed at the Warren Biden Buttigieg because it is more of a privileged class. It's a PMC class, which is, I mean, because we have a wage gap, that wage gap comes from that PMC class being male.
Sure.
So, you know, we made a joke that it was a woman. It's a dude. That Warren voter,
Yeah.
he's a fucking white dude that looks
Yeah.
exactly like you and me and has a fake internet girlfriend that talks about cum a lot.
The callback. The
And
callback.
she's real. She's real. She's real.
She is
and
real.
She's not
Yeah.
a Warren voter. She's a Bernie voter.
Right.
And she loves cum so much
It's true.
that she just talks about it constantly. Total smoke show, by the way. Way out of this dude's league. When I say
Every
way
other
out of this
tweet,
dude's
huh?
league, what's that?
Every other tweet, huh?
Dude, every other tweet's about cum and total smoke show. Like, she's doing it as a bit because he told her. So that's the crazy thing is he says the internet really likes it when people joke about cum, right? And then so she's just like, I can make cum jokes. This is easy.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
crushes at it like so much better than other
Right.
cum jokers. Her cum jokers look like they were written by like a professional comic trying to be a fake girlfriend. That's why it was so believable that it was fake, because it was like, this is too perfect.
No, it's too good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Why
the-
did she
that's
have
the bait and
50
switch.
followers in 6 months? This doesn't make sense. She should have more followers than this. And it was because everybody just thought she was fake.
We have been debated.
Yeah. We've been debated.
Debated.
We've been Joe baited. I don't know what that
We've
is.
been debated. It's an internet thing. Don't worry about it.
Debated?
We've been we've been debated.
Is it like debated?
No, it's like debated. It's a Twitch thing. Don't worry about it. I'm in between the politics. I'm like into watching people like play video games online for
okay.
whatever reason, and it's one of
weird.
their.
See, I love watching gaming too, but I only watch Rockstar games and I only watch speedrunners.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
only San Andreas was my big one for a long time.
Mhm.
Specific percents, like not like any percent or 100% runs. I would only watch like, 30-minute little like whatever.
I just love these little niche communities that are online that like, they have those, like, cow percent or I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah, GTA 5 has a bunch of those. They have like what's it called, like stunt jump percent, or like the fly the airplane percent, like under the bridge percent,
right?
Shit like that, which rocks. Yeah, I love that for sure.
Isn't it wild that like GTA 5 is like the most commercially sold media ever, like of all time? Yeah.
At the time, it was the most expensive piece of art ever produced in human history.
Well,
it was 3 Titanics.
We deserve everything coming to us.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, honestly, that was spread out among so many different industries that it's like, I mean, it's an expensive piece of media, but it was like that went to comics, it went to recording engineers, tons of musicians. It wasn't just like 6 programmers were like hit with whips and one guy had a paycheck. It was like,
right.
It's a huge undertaking to think about that game. But shouts out, by the way, if y'all, hey, hot take, GTA 5's good.
It is. We're pulling out the real depth, the real substance in this podcast. GTA 5 is good.
GTA 5 is unironically good. So I think this is the longest one we've done so far. We could have.
Where are we at? Yeah.
I don't know, because I just know what time it is, and I don't have a recording timer on the recorder. And we paused for like 2 seconds when I took my jacket off, turned the fan on because it was hot as fuck.
Yeah.
Because I have my blinds open and it's like pouring sunlight in. It's fighting the air conditioner. I don't know what's going on. So.
Well, it has been fun. Great Satan is an amazing idea for a podcast. And listeners, if you guys want a part 2, make a good case in the comments. And Jason, I really appreciate being on, man.
Thanks. I'll probably have you on again sometime because we didn't even barely touch on, higher education or anything. But for sure, we'll have you on again sometime.
Yeah, and just if I can put a plug in real quick before
Yeah,
we go,
get your plug out.
uh, APAEP, the Alabama Prison Arts and Education Project. You can donate. I know that there's a lot of places that are in need right now, but honestly, this is a one of the only programs like it in the state where people that are in prison can get an education. Not only can they get a full degree from Auburn, but they also do have programs for art, poetry, paintings. They've got a ton of cool art series that are made by those who are in prison. And, it's a really great positive way that you can continue supporting people. And a lot of those guys have made a lot of mistakes. They've made a lot of, big painful parts of their past, but this is a way that you can continue not only continuing to fund teachers like me and people like me, but I donate because I know that it's going directly towards these people and trying to get them in education. And kind of like what we were talking about today, right now the program is really off to a halt because of the virus. And if you can donate any money that you can or anytime you can to looking up the Alabama Prison Arts and Education Project, and be considerate of those who are locked up right now, because if you think that it's bad here, this is a really great sort of teaspoon of what you can imagine it would be like if you did get on the wrong side of the law.
Big time. And if you guys need anything about someone in your lives has a kid that's getting ready for ACT test prep, I have access to free ACT test prep, both through legal and illegal means.
There you go.
So absolutely hit me up in the DMs, and we can get that worked out. This is not conspiracy to commit copyright fraud, because a lot of this stuff is not for sale.
Right.
So it is not breaking any laws whatsoever. It's all about building confidence too. I think that first, second, third, fourth ACT test that you take, look, not everybody can afford to do that, but you can take free tests that are not the real test, and that gets you the confidence that you need to get those better grades. That tested up against each other, that is what super testing really is doing it a bunch of times so that you're comfortable doing it. So
that's right.
And then I'm going to put a link to the arts and it's too long of a thing for me to even
say.
It
really is. Yeah, we got to work on
fun of Nelson for not being able to do his plugs right, but goddamn, they actually are really hard if you don't have notes.
No kidding. Yeah.
We're not the Great Satan. America's the Great Satan, and we are part of the resistance to overthrow it. So thanks, guys. Have a great day. And